The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and sugar syrup, the kind of place where everything sticks. Tables, floors, memories. It was loud in that curated way meant to feel alive. Clinking mugs, laughter timed for cameras, phones lifted and lowered like reflexes. I stood near the counter, coat still on, wondering why my mother had insisted we meet here instead of somewhere quiet. The answer arrived faster than I expected. My name is Lauren Hale. I'm 30 years old. I've always been the invisible one. That's what I told myself as I waited, how I survived rooms where attention was currency I didn't spend. I learned early to keep my voice measured, my posture neutral, my reactions small. In my family, restraint was mistaken for weakness and weakness was fair game. My mother was already there, flanked by people I recognized only vaguely, friends of friends, coworkers, acquaintances who felt entitled to the story because they'd shown up to watch it. Someone had propped a phone against a sugar jar. Another adjusted their camera angle. I noticed all of it without fully understanding why it mattered yet. "Watch this," my mother said, smiling too widely. She lifted her cup. I saw the dark surface ripple. I smelled it before it hit me, bitter, scalding, unmistakable. Coffee poured down my collar, soaked through my sweater, bloomed across fabric like a stain with intent. Heat flared, sharp and immediate. I gasped, not loudly, just enough to draw breath, and the room erupted. "That's how we treat trash," she said. Laughter broke out, uneven and electric. Someone hooped. Someone else said, "Oh my God." Phones tilted. Red lights blinked. I stood there, stunned, my skin burning, my hands clenched so tightly I felt my nails bite. A memory drifted in, uninvited. My mother calling me dramatic at 14 for crying when she ripped a drawing in half. "It's just paper," she'd said. The lesson wasn't subtle. Objects mattered. Feelings didn't. I didn't move. Shock does that. It pins you in place while the world keeps going. Someone handed my mother a napkin like this was a party trick gone well. Another person angled closer, narrating for their live stream. I caught fragments. "Teach her a lesson, don't disrespect family, she needed humbling." Humbling. Like humility was something poured, not learned. I took one slow breath. The air tasted like sugar and steam. My heart hammered, but my face stayed still. I could feel coffee cooling against my skin, the stickiness setting in. I could hear my own pulse, loud and insistent, reminding me I was still here. "Lauren," someone said, trying to coax a reaction. "Say something." I didn't. I stepped back instead, reaching for a napkin, then another. My hands shook now, not with fear but with something else I couldn't name yet. Anger maybe. Or clarity. I wiped my collar, aware of how ridiculous it looked, like I was cleaning up a spill that wasn't an accident. They posted it within minutes. I know because my phone buzzed before the coffee finished dripping from my hair. A tag. Then another. A message from a colleague asking if I was okay. A text from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this you?" I walked out without saying goodbye. Outside the air was cold and clean, shocking in the best way. I leaned against the brick wall and closed my eyes. The city kept moving, cars passing, a bus sighing to a stop, a couple arguing softly on the corner. Ordinary life, continuing without permission. I checked my phone again. Notifications stacked like dominoes. The video was already spreading. The comments were brutal, then curious, then something else. Someone posted a screenshot from a magazine spread. Another linked an article. Wait, isn't that the woman from Forbes? My stomach dropped. I thought of the last interview I'd done, the one where they asked about my childhood and I'd smiled and deflected, saying I preferred to talk about work. I thought of the way my mother had rolled her eyes when the issue came out, muttering about ego and luck. The cafe door opened. Laughter spilled out. Someone yelled my mother's name like she'd won something. I pushed away from the wall and started walking. My coat was ruined. My skin still burned. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I've always been the invisible one. But invisibility has limits. And that morning, soaked in coffee and filmed without consent, I crossed one I didn't even know existed. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady again. That surprised me. I'd expected shaking, maybe tears once the shock wore off. Instead, there was a strange clarity, like my body had decided panic was inefficient. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, letting cold air cut through the smell of coffee clinging to my clothes. My phone kept vibrating in my lap, relentless, insistent. I've always been the invisible one. But invisibility doesn't mean absence. It just means people forget you're watching. I finally looked. The video had already crossed 1 million views. Angles multiplied. Someone's live stream, someone else's repost, slowed down clips with captions added. My mother's voice was unmistakable. That's how we treat trash. The word echoed through every version, sharpened by repetition. Comment sections filled faster than I could read them. Outrage. Then recognition. Screenshots of articles followed. A photo from a conference panel I'd spoken on last year. A headline about innovation and leadership. Someone stitched the footage next to my Forbes profile picture, the contrast so stark it felt staged. Isn't this Lauren Hale? Why is her own mother doing this? This is assault. I closed my eyes and let the phone drop onto the passenger seat. A memory drifted in, soft and unwelcome. My mother once telling me if people really knew you they wouldn't admire you so much. I'd been 15. I'd believed her. I drove home slowly, every red light a chance to breathe. The coffee stains spread as the fabric dried, ugly and permanent. When I reached my apartment, I peeled off my sweater and dropped it in the sink, watching brown water cloud and swirl. My skin was red along my collarbone, tender to the touch. The first call came from my assistant. "Lauren," she said carefully, "are you safe?" "Yes," I replied. "But it's real." She exhaled. "We're getting inquiries. Media. People. HR from 2 different companies. People in the video." I sat on the edge of the couch, towel draped over my shoulders. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," she said. "But this is bigger than them now." That word, them, landed heavy. My mother and the people with her worked in industries where reputation was oxygen. Consulting firms. Nonprofits. A university adjunct position. Jobs built on public trust and private restraint. Jobs that didn't survive viral proof of cruelty. I've always been the invisible one. Invisibility teaches you patterns. Who speaks first? Who laughs? Who records? By evening, statements began appearing. Half apologies, clarifications, the familiar language of damage control. Taken out of context. A joke. Family matter. The comments tore them apart. The internet is ruthless when hypocrisy is clear and evidence is high definition. A lawyer called next. Efficient. "We can pursue this several ways," she said. Assault. Harassment. Non-consensual recording. "I don't want revenge," I said automatically. She paused. "This isn't revenge. It's consequence." That word stayed with me. I didn't post. I didn't respond publicly. Silence, I'd learned, was louder when everyone expected a meltdown. I sent one message to my mother. "Do not contact me. All further communication goes through counsel." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then nothing. The next morning, headlines shifted. Executives placed on leave after viral video. University launches investigation. Company cuts ties with staff seen in assault footage. I read them without satisfaction. Without relief. Just acknowledgement. This was momentum, not justice. Momentum doesn't care who started it. I stood at my window, city spread out below, and thought about all the times I'd swallowed humiliation because it was easier than being called difficult. All the rooms where I'd stayed small to keep peace that was never meant for me. I've always been the invisible one. And invisibility ends the moment the truth is undeniable. By afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message forwarded by my assistant. "They've all been terminated." I closed my eyes. Not because I felt powerful, but because for the first time I understood something clearly. I hadn't ruined their lives. I hadn't exposed them. They'd shown exactly who they were. And the world had simply believed them. The messages changed tone after that. The outrage cooled into analysis. Commentators stopped asking what happened and started asking how this happens. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips from panels where I'd spoken about leadership and accountability were stitched beside the cafe footage. My calm professional voice layered against my mother's laughter. The contrast unsettled people. It unsettled me too. I've always been the invisible one. Being seen all at once felt like standing under a spotlight I hadn't rehearsed for. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. Not out of fear, out of exhaustion. I showered twice a day, scrubbing at skin that no longer burned but still felt marked. I answered only the calls that mattered. My assistant. My lawyer. One close friend who didn't ask for details just said, "I'm here," and meant it. My mother tried to reach me through other people. An aunt left a voicemail, voice trembling with forced neutrality. "She didn't mean it like that. She's under a lot of stress." A cousin texted that I should consider forgiveness, that public consequences were permanent. Someone else suggested mediation, as if humiliation could be neutralized by a conference room. I didn't respond. I've always been the invisible one. Invisibility teaches you that explanations are currency. I wasn't paying anymore. A longer memory drifted in one night while I lay awake listening to traffic below. Me at 11 standing in the kitchen while my mother critiqued my posture in front of guests. "Stand up straight. Don't embarrass me." The lesson had been consistent. Appearances mattered more than comfort. Shame was corrective. Public lessons stuck better. I wondered if she remembered that too. By the third day, the fallout reached a different stage. Statements were retracted. Profiles scrubbed. LinkedIn bios updated to vague phrases about new opportunities. The university announced an internal review, then quietly confirmed the adjunct contract had been terminated. One consulting firm released a memo emphasizing values and distancing language that left no room for ambiguity. People lost jobs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mourn either. Consequences don't ask permission from your feelings. They arrive when systems finally do what they're supposed to do. My lawyer called again. "We need to decide how far you want to take this." I stared at the coffee-stained sweater drying on a rack near the sink. "I don't want to be the story," I said. "You already are," she replied gently. "The question is whether you control the ending." That night, my mother emailed from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Please." She wrote about embarrassment, about misunderstanding, about how people online didn't know our family. She wrote that she was scared. She wrote that she was still my mother. She did not apologize. I closed the email without replying. I've always been the invisible one. But invisibility doesn't mean silence. It means being ignored when you speak. The next morning, a producer reached out asking for a comment. "Just a statement," she said. "You don't have to go on camera." I drafted something short. Factual. Clean. No emotion to be exploited. I was assaulted in a public place. I did not consent to being recorded or humiliated. Accountability is not cruelty. It's responsibility. I sent it. Then I turned my phone off. When I turned it back on hours later, the response was quieter, steadier. Less spectacle. More understanding. People shared their own stories in private messages. Workplace abuse, family humiliation, moments they wished they'd walked away from sooner. Reading them, I felt the weight shift again, not toward power but toward connection. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. My collarbone still faintly pink. My eyes tired but clear. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Legal paths were still open. Family ties were frayed beyond repair. The internet's attention would move on as it always does. What I knew was this. I didn't choose to be seen this way. But I was choosing how to stand in it. And for the first time, standing didn't feel like something I had to endure. It felt like something I could decide. The world didn't end the way it does in comment sections. It reorganized. Quietly at first. Contracts paused. Invitations rescinded. Names removed from websites as if they'd never been there. The cafe issued a statement about safety and banned filming on the premises. Then they closed for renovations, which everyone understood meant waiting for memory to fade. It didn't. I returned to my routine in pieces. Morning walks. Emails answered with intention instead of urgency. I learned how to say no without offering reasons. The coffee stain on my sweater never fully came out, so I cut it into cleaning rags and felt oddly relieved when I did. Objects, like people, don't all deserve restoration. I've always been the invisible one. Invisibility teaches you to prepare for fallout. Visibility teaches you who survives it. The legal side resolved faster than I expected. Settlements are quiet by design. They don't announce justice. They acknowledge reality. My lawyer handled it with precision, and when it was done, she asked if I wanted to pursue anything further. "No," I said. "I want to move forward." Forward didn't mean reconciliation. My mother never apologized. The closest she came was a message sent through counsel expressing regret for how things were perceived. I read it once and handed it back like a receipt for something I didn't buy. "We don't speak now." That distance is not punishment. It's alignment. The people who laughed in the video reached out individually. Some apologized. Some blamed stress. One asked if I could help them find work. I didn't respond. Consequences aren't a negotiation. Weeks later, I attended a small event. No cameras, no press. Just a room of women sharing experiences without spectacle. Someone recognized me but didn't mention the video. Instead, she said, "Thank you for not shrinking." I carried that with me longer than any headline. I've always been the invisible one. Being seen didn't change that overnight. It changed what invisibility meant. There were moments of grief I didn't expect. Not for my mother as she is, but for the mother I needed and never had. Grief doesn't ask for logic. It arrives when your body finally has space to feel. I let it pass through without trying to turn it into a lesson. I kept my life simple. Work I care about. People who don't confuse cruelty with humor. Boundaries that don't wobble when tested. I stopped bracing for embarrassment and started trusting my instincts again. They'd been right all along. If you've ever been the one laughed at while others called it a joke, you know how long it takes to believe your reaction was valid. Some families don't raise voices. They raise audiences. I thought about that cafe sometimes. The phones lifted, the applause timed for impact. How easily humiliation becomes entertainment when empathy is optional. I didn't need revenge to counter that. I needed refusal. Refusal to explain. Refusal to minimize. Refusal to disappear. The last update I received came from my assistant, forwarded without commentary. All parties from the video are no longer employed. I read it once and closed the message. Not because I felt powerful but because the chapter had ended. I didn't win anything. I didn't ruin anyone. I stayed standing when the moment asked me to fold. And that's the part no one can take from me. Dignity doesn't require witnesses.